Hello, my name's Olurotimi Osha. I often discuss American presidents. That was what I created my YouTube channel for. But at the same time, I draw attention to color of law violations, deprivation of rights, and malicious prosecution, pivoting on subordination of perjury and fraud on the courts. I lost my freedom on May 16, 2023, when I was swatted. Swatting is it's a criminal harassment tactic in which somebody or people make false police reports in order to generate a SWAT team at the victim's residence. And so that was what happened to me on May 16, 2023. I was assaulted by the police, removed from my home naked, in handcuffs, dumped in a hospital, and then I was subsequently wrongfully arrested at the door of the hospital after I was discharged. I had been treated for injuries that are sustained by the excessive force used by the police. And since then, to add insult to injury, false charges were filed against me by Montgomery County Police, who didn't have an arrest warrant to come to my home. The police who came to my home and assaulted me on false allegations that I wasn't aware of would falsely imprison me in the process. They did a number of illegal actions, right? It was illegal conduct. They claimed I assaulted them in my own home where they had no arrest warrant, no reason to be, uh, you know, they had no justification for being at my home because they didn't have probable cause. I've given definitions of probable cause. Again, probable cause is where there are facts and circumstances within the officer's knowledge, uh, with reason, uh, with reasonably trustworthy information, sufficient to warrant a belief by a man of reasonable caution that a crime is being committed. That didn't exist. Fourth Amendment violation. Again, you can't, recite the Fourth Amendment enough. It's the right of the people to be secure in their houses. The right of the people to be secure in their houses. Sorry, I want to recite it in exactly the way it was written in the Bill of Rights, which is in the Constitution. So if I'm taking time to memorize it, I think you should too. If you live in America, because you never know when those rights will be violated by the police or the state. So again, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, um, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and persons or things to be seized. So that's why I've been doing these videos. My rights have been violated for the past 3 years. My right to a trial has been violated, but the state has used these trumped up charges to defame me, to take my job from me. I had a secure job in the federal government, and on the eve of the apart from having a job as an auditor in the Department of the Navy and having been a John S. McCain Strategic Defense Fellow, right, working in the Office of the Secretary of the Defense to be a future senior leader of the Department of Defense, I had various offers, right, a number of offers. I had to just pick my position, my job with respect to the federal government. And of course, I also had opportunities in the private sector. So as of that day, I had just been tentatively offered a position as a director to be of financial crimes, to be director of financial crimes, $250,000 base salary. I told Jide Warrior about it. This man knew, so he knew. My life was going great. I was involved. I was in a relationship with someone. I had lots of friends. I was healthy. I constantly would go to the gym every week. I was posting the food I made. I ate in a very healthy way. I made my own food. I went to the gym. So my life was great. Everything was going well. I was preparing for my vacation, right? So the reason why I'm stating this is because I'm going to compare what I'm experiencing with the movie Trading Places, right? Trading Places, it's a 1983 movie that launched uh, Eddie Murphy as a major star. He was very young, but he was so mature in the movie. He was about 22 years old, and the lead man was supposed to be Dan Aykroyd, uh, but Eddie Murphy stole the show. That made him a huge star, world star. Eddie Murphy had been known in his when he started off in Saturday Night Live, but now Trading Places like launched his phenomenal success as a major global star. And I think he became the first black star that was an A-lister that compared with the best. He was amongst the top people in Hollywood. He wasn't just a black supporting cast. He now became the main person in Hollywood. He was supposed to be the supporting cast because Dan Aykroyd was he's headlined as the first person, but Eddie Murphy ended up stealing the show, and he went on to do other greater movies, and of course, the rest is history. So I'm discussing what I'm experienced because it was sort of like a role reversal. It's like they just traded my life, the way my life was going well. A highly educated, successful person, never been arrested, no criminal history. The reason I was working in the federal government was not because I couldn't work in the private sector. I'd worked in the private sector before. Interestingly, I'd been a stockbroker as well, with Bank of America, with Wachovia Securities. I'd been a financial specialist. Um, Wachovia Securities is now Wells Fargo. I'd done a number of things. Worked, for a variety of major Fortune 500 companies in the U.S. before I decided I was going to, join the federal government. The federal government actually pursued me, and I accepted, and I joined them. So life was going well, but with this trumped up charges against me, right? False accusations. I haven't had a trial. It's 3 years, but they've basically tried to take my life, and they've created this false narrative that I have not been given the opportunity to respond to. They've created false witnesses, fabricated evidence, and the place where I get, apart from the judge himself looking and seeing that, well, this is a malicious prosecution, so he gets to dismiss it. But it shows that the judge, the fact that it hasn't happened that way, and the fact that Judge James Bonifant, the circuit administrative judge of Montgomery County, he's been perpetrating procedural unfairness himself, right? He's done two false incompetency to stand trial orders. He's tried to coerce me to take a plea bargain. He's been, in fact, fabricating evidence in court directly by making false statements, malicious, intentional false statements in court. And again, all he's tried to do is he's weaponized the process, the system, the courts, uh, for his self-aggrandizement. And so it's astonishing, especially given that I actually have a law degree. By the way, my background, I graduated from George Washington University Law School with a Juris Doctor degree. That's a Doctor of Law degree. I have a bachelor's degree from Columbia University. I have an MBA in accounting from Troy University in Troy, Alabama. I studied at Oxford University. I did international human rights law at Oxford University. I studied at Bocconi University in Milan, Italy as well. So I'm educated, right? I have the education, and I had no prior criminal involvement. I'd never been embroiled in the criminal justice system. So they filed these false charges against me. And apart from the judge or the state attorney looking and saying, well, this is not a good case, they should dismiss it, it perverts the course of justice. The only other place I get a chance to be able to, to demonstrate this is in court. But the judge superintending over the case, Judge Bonifant, has corruptly weaponized the system against me, the court process, in his attempts in his self-aggrandizement. And so I get to see the public corruption in at least Montgomery County, Maryland's criminal justice system. And my experience is teaching me that there are if I, somebody with an impeccable record like myself, if I'm experiencing a frame up, an abusive process in Maryland, that's live, it's going on, and they're falsifying evidence, they're constructing false narratives, they're creating false witnesses, they're committing perjury, the police is committing perjury on the oath, and it doesn't matter. And a judge himself is committing fraud upon the court. That's Judge James Bonifant, telling lies, and they have a racket. If that's happening to someone like me, that I'm law abiding, what happens to other indigent people, like other black men who don't have the access to resources that I had, or the opportunities or the education that I've had, right? And so I learned from this that if I can experience this, there are other black men who are being framed. There are other Americans who've been framed by a corrupt judge, a corrupt police who's framed them. These things are happening in America, right? I got to be able to look inside and the jail system, the psychiatric hospitals where they wrongfully commit people who don't accept to be coerced to take a wrongful plea bargain. And, so I got to see the public corruption that goes on through the court system. And that's why I'm using an analogy with Trading Places, the movie Trading Places. So let me get into it. This is what happened in the movie Trading Places. So Eddie Murphy, of course, you can watch it. It's a very interesting movie, very old movie. Eddie Murphy is a homeless grifter, right? A street hustler. And that's a character he plays in the movie. And I think was it Willie Valentine or something was his name. And then there's a guy, Winthrop the Third, has one of these funny names. That's Dan Aykroyd. So he's a stockbroker in a white shoe investment firm, a commodities brokerage firm. And he's very wealthy. He's upper crust. He's gone to all the right schools. He has a right circle of friends, and I think he's a managing director in this Wall Street investment firm. The commodities brokerage firm. Two characters, right? And I remember their names so well. Ralph Bellamy, of course, they were really old, and Don Amici. They were both the owners of the commodities firm, the white shoe investment firm. They were the owners, and they decided on a wager. They had a $1 wager, and they were going to conduct an experiment and switch roles. Switch roles between Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd. Right? Dan Aykroyd was he was white, wealthy stockbroker, right? And Eddie Murphy was the indigent street hustler, and the grifter he was. So the brothers were going to switch their roles, and they were going to make Eddie Murphy all of a sudden the install him as in Dan Aykroyd's role as a stockbroker in their firm, give him his house, give him his chauffeur and butler, which is Coleman. In fact, there's a scene that I want to quickly mention that's kind of ironic. And then on the other hand, they would frame Dan Aykroyd, set him up with drugs, get him arrested, freeze all his accounts, blackball him, defame him, kick him, fire him from his job, give him a criminal record, So that was what they did. They basically traded their places on a $1 wager. Now, there was a scene that I wanted to talk about, which is kind of ironic. So Eddie Murphy, when he's first taken into Dan Aykroyd's former home, because he now made Dan Aykroyd's home his home. So he's taken into the home and he's placed in a jacuzzi. There's a scene where the butler's name was Coleman, right? That was his name. His real name was Denholm Elliott, right? He was in a number. He's in a number of movies. Denholm Elliott. So the Coleman, Eddie Murphy's butler, then refers to he's describing the jacuzzi, telling Eddie Murphy that he's in a jacuzzi because Eddie Murphy is stripped and he's in the jacuzzi, right? And so he just goes jacuzzi, sir, just trying to tell him what it was. And Eddie Murphy was anxious and angry, and he uses the F word, saying that that you ain't jacuzziing nobody. That that I knew you were all and he used the F word expletive, saying that that Coleman was really gay, that he was really a homosexual, right? So it's kind of funny that occurred because it turned out that Denham Holmes, right, he died of AIDS later on. So apparently he was a closeted homosexual. But and this is not a gay bash. I think people have the right to sexual orientation. But it was interesting. I guess in his time, it was uh, it was unpopular for him to come out, but he because interestingly he'd been married to two different women on two he'd been married to two different women, even had kids at one point in time, even married a woman much younger than him, which many heterosexual men who are attracted to women when they get older, they continue to be attracted to to the younger women. I'm not talking about the pedo under 18 women, but middle-aged men being attracted to women in their 30s, right? So, um, so this guy he'd been married, he had kids, yeah, he had kids, right? And but it turned out that he was actually homosexual all the while, closeted, and he died of AIDS. So that scene where uh, Eddie Murphy is saying that he knew he was really a closeted uh, a gay person. It's really ironic, and I wonder who the director of the movie was. John Landis. By the way, the movie made was a tremendous success. It was like the fourth highest grossing movie in North America, and it was globally popular. I remember I watched it when I was a kid in Nigeria. I watched it so many times, and it launched the movie career of Eddie Murphy. So um, you know, John Landis. So I wonder what he was thinking. John Landis, by the way, was a great director. John Landis is one who directed Michael Jackson's Thriller. Everybody knows Thriller. John Landis directed it. John Landis directed An American Werewolf in London. I watched that movie when I was a kid. I remember how scared that movie made me. It was the scariest horror movie I'd ever seen. Well, apart from The Exorcist. But John Landis, he's still alive. He's a great director. It's funny people don't talk that much about him as a director, but John Landis was really big back then. So back to the the switching of roles. And so you see, it was just an experiment that the brothers decided to conduct uh, regarding nature versus nurture, right? Nature versus nurture experiment. And it's ironic how the movie, because uh, they had used the factotum of a guy who was like an enforcer. He was a minor, an enforcer who was the one who did the framing, right? He framed, had got law enforcement. The police was in on it. The police was in on it, framing Dan Aykroyd, right? His name was Winthrop something, right? And the way they just blackballed this guy, he couldn't get a job anymore. All his friends isolated him, alienated him. He was closed, shut out of his home, his clubs, his circles, everything. And it's like, this is what they tried to do to me in Maryland, but I'm not from here. I'm from Nigeria. They even created a man, an impersonator, and said he was my uncle. This crazy man, Jide Warere. Jide Warere then falsified stuff, right? Records and all these things. So it's like they tried to just isolate me from my friends. But fortunately, I have my friends, my family. My mother's in Nigeria. You can't change who my mother is. And they were sending false information. It kept me away from my home. And what I find particularly despicable and odious is the fact that they used a judge, Judge James Bonifant, to do this. He can't be that stupid. And so it's funny, this is like a hackneyed script. The script is just hackneyed. It's not even good. It's so obvious what's gone on, right? My family, my friends, they all know how that this is a false narrative that the state of Maryland has scripted, and so it's not even good. It's you'd have to be stupid to believe the false charges, all the things, the false narratives that have been engineered by the state of Maryland against me. You'd have to be stupid, or if they're acting as an agent on behalf of the Department of Defense or Department of the Navy that I filed complaints against, or my landlord, Aeon Management, that just suddenly started to dox me, was filing false failure to pay notices against me. That was how it ostensibly started, right? And I haven't had a day in court till today, and they've been using these ex parte orders. So a judge orders something when I'm not present. That's a like it's an aberration of due. It's a violation of departure from due process when a judge issues an ex parte order, because you're entitled to answer your accusers in court. So they do an ex parte order from a civil matter, because a civil matter is not a summons. They can't arrest you for a civil matter, and then they use that uh, ex parte civil matter to give the police excuse to come to my premises, and then the police violates me, falsely imprisons me, gaslights me, assaults me, right? And then claims that they're the ones that I assaulted them, even though they have no arrest warrant, no probable cause. I'm not committing any crime. And we're now seeing, from my experience, I'm now seeing the abuses, the injustices committed by people who are meant to be custodians of the law, like a Judge James Bonifant. Uh, it's it completely contradicts our ethos, right? Again, in the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson, amongst the main grievances that he repeats over and over. In fact, it was it was many grievances. It constituted many of the 28 grievances, right? It had to do with um, the court system, the administration of the courts system, due process of law, right? He talked about, the king obstructing the administration of justice, the independent, he not allowing the courts to be independent of his will, the mock trials that were set up, that there were the prevention of jury trials, that people were taken overseas, to answer to pretended offenses, right? False charges that that jury trials, they were prevented from having jury trials. So the administration of justice, the proper functioning of the courts, right, the rule of law, this was very important in the Declaration of Independence. And so when we had our Constitution of 1787, our fourth president, James Madison, added the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights are not separate from the Constitution. They are actually fundamental. They're fundamentally a part of the US Constitution. And again, half of those 10 amendments in the Bill of Rights, half of them have to do with the legal system, the legal process, the administration of the courts, the rights of the accused, right? Due process, right? Fourth Amendment prevents illegal search and seizure, right? Uh, the Fifth Amendment, that's due process of law, right not to self-incriminate, right? That's due process. And then the Sixth Amendment, your right to a fair, speedy trial, public trial by jury, right? And right to have, in all criminal prosecutions, right to have your absolute right to have effective counsel, right? Assistance of effective counsel, your right to face your accusers, to confront your accusers, your right to subpoena witnesses on your behalf, all of these have been violated in my case. I haven't had a trial till today. And then your Seventh Amendment, that's civil, but it says that you it has to do with the civil case at the federal level, right? Your right to a jury in a civil case at a federal level, certain civil cases, uh, federal civil cases. And then the Eighth Amendment, of course, that prevents the excessive bails and fines and prohibits cruel and unusual punishment, right? So it's so abhorrent, it's outrageous that we have a corrupt judge like Judge James Bonifant, for whom actually an attorney who ironically was obtained for procured, was paid by my false accuser, the impersonator and perjurer Jude Iwariri, a Howard University professor, paid this guy, Steve Mercer, who tried to solicit a bribe on behalf of the state and Judge Bonifant. So this is a perversion of justice. If I'm experiencing it, and there's been no investigation, right? If I'm experiencing it, what do other people who are not as educated, what do other people who've made mistakes in the past, what is it that they're experiencing, right? So there are people in our system, in our court system, in our legal system, criminal justice system, in our government, who play God, right? They play God. They're no longer public servants. We don't have kings in our system. Our public servants are not gods. They can't play gods, right? They be megalomaniacal, they'll be delusional if they think that their role is supposed to is their power, their office uh, enables them to be gods, right, over American citizens and to weaponize the legal process against Americans. Uh, they're supposed to be public servants serving we the people. So I just wanted to point out today how what I'm experiencing in Montgomery County, Maryland, uh, it mimics the movie Trading Places. I guess that's an instance of life imitating art, and you can also say art imitates life, because these directors, these writers, they probably write their scripts from what they know is going on in real life. Um, so, in any event, I want to keep this under 30 minutes, and I will keep you posted. Thank you.